Thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are coming to you from Holyoke, Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining me is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Como. He offers both public and private tours, as well as presentations of the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, South Hadley, and Chicopee, Mass. Now you actually lead these tours and give these presentations yourself, is that correct?
Yes, and this is right on the first level canal, so people can see it very easily.
And so today you'll be talking about the Prentiss wire mill. So tell us about the early history of Prentiss wire.
The Prentiss Wire Company was formed in Holyoke in 1857. It was one of the first companies ever in Holyoke, and it was one of the first mills, probably about the seventh mill ever made in Holyoke on the canals. It uses the first level's canal water and brings it down to the second level canal. So the water in the beginning, of course, was water power. And mill number one, which is not there anymore, used water power because there was no electricity in Holyoke to 1895. They were made in 1857. They used water power, and they used it up all the way, and then a combination of electricity and water power until they finally closed in 1961. They were around Holyoke 104 years, which is wonderful for most companies. And the building number one was taken down in 1963, so most people don't know about it. And mill number two was made across mill number one from canal number one from mill number one. So they were back to back against each other, but number two did not use the canal's water power, it used electricity. It was made long after electric power came around. It was mostly used for storage and administration and so forth. Now, the Prentiss family lived a long time in Holyoke, and their homes are very easy to find, except the son's home. It was taken down maybe 3 years ago. It's gone. And he used to live at 207 Elm Street. It had become a professional building after he died. And then it got worn down, and finally they just took it down. Now, the father lived on Northampton Street, or 196 Northampton Street. And his house ended up also being taken down. So his name was George Prentiss, and he was very popular around Holyoke. Now, along the way, I'm going to tell you what they made for products and what their production like was in their plants, number one and two, and then what has become of the whole area down there. And I hope you get to see it. It's actually the location and the start of most of my canal tours. They start at the Holyoke Heritage State Park, and if you look right across from where we start on Dwight Street, to the right is the Prentiss Mill number two. So most people see it. It's not a very impressive mill in terms of architecture, but it's still a nice place to start.
So what did Prentiss Mill make?
Okay, they made lots of wire products, and it could be a lot of chemicals being used in it. Mostly was iron, steel, copper, and very specialized uses. You'd have silver and other kinds of wires. And what were they trying to do? Anything you can think of with wires, and in any shape. And that includes you can make hairpins, you can make pins, you can make flower stems, artificial flower stems. You can make piano wire, and they did. So, and that wire has to be braided, it has to be so forth, it has to be twisted. You can make spiral wire used inside of springs, which is used inside of machinery. Sometimes the spiral has to be very light, not tight, like in a clock, and sometimes it has to be big and very tight and very powerful. And then you can have lots of other products beyond the imagination. Most people don't ever think to themselves how much wire is being used in the world. Now, also they made wire that they braided on themselves, and wire that was covered up with other products like paper, like plastic, like rubber, and electricity wire for electricity use. They didn't do this, but wire also can be used in a braided fashion, and in a strong fashion, it could be used inside of suspension bridges. Right, so that's the many uses of wires, and most of them they did use, and they would sell them right out of the plant, whether it was tin, copper, bronze, so forth, or whatever you used to have, whether it was a finished product, whether it was a product that would then be sold on to other producers to change it over. So they did a lot for Holyoke.
So quickly, before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And if you're interested in setting up a private tour, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And they are perfect for fun and educational outdoor activities for the whole family or for your group parties, especially those special occasions and get-togethers. They are also good just for getting outdoors for the day. So, getting back to our interview, what was production like at Prentiss Wire?
All right, it was a multi-floor mill, and all multi-floor mills in Holyoke, meaning that production starts on the uppermost floors, and then it comes downwards. And so the finished product is going to be on the first floor. And they did have a retail store on that floor. Now, of course, they were making copper products, and especially they were making a lot of different chemicals, a lot of so forth and so on. So what were they doing? Um, most of the mill was 3 or 4 floors high. What they were doing is the beginning product was on the top floor. So up there you have the room where you have the wire ready to be melted down. And then what's one of the first steps? Once you have it melt down, you want to shape it. So the shaping room is there, and then you want to dry it into a particular shape. Okay, then you bring it down to the next room, and what do you do? Well, you put it into a product, right? You have it either shaped or drawn out, and you want to make it into one of the many products I've mentioned along the way. Now, the next room down, that's where you make it of different dimensions. So say that you have copper wire, and you now have it on big spools already. Well, not every user is going to need the same dimensions of the wire, and so they might draw it down towards 1/16 of an inch, or 2/16 of an inch, 3/16 of an inch, right? So you get it into a room where it can be drawn down to the right shape. All right, and then on the ground floor, you have the storage, you have the retail stores, you have the administration offices, and all these help greatly. Now, it was also very close to a railroad because the Holyoke to Westfield Railroad was put in a few years after they started, and they used that greatly, and that was a great help along the way. Now, you probably mentioned that. You probably remember that I mentioned that there's actually 2 mills in place here, and mill one was downwards of the first level canal, and mill number 2 was upwards of that first level canal. Right. So what were they doing on the other side of the canal? All right. Of course, they were making that side was mostly for a store, and was mostly for storage, was also mostly for administration, and then the number one was mostly for production. And that's because there you still get to use the canal's powerful water. And now along the way, sometime in the 1940s, the Prentiss Company opened up a mill number 3, and that was at the very, very end of the first level canal. So they had gotten so large at one point that a mill number 1, 2, and 3 in Holyoke, all in Holyoke. And that was because there was more need for wire around the company, and probably because World War II had expanded the uses of wire. Okay, so next question.
Now, what has become of the company?
Okay, by 1961, it had shut down its mill number 1. By the late 60s, it was shutting down the other 2 mills. Mill number 3 is not there anymore. I don't know when it was taken down. Mill number 2 is still there. It's located above the first little canal. I noticed last year at some point that the inside was cleaned out and they brought in office desks, office chairs. They're probably trying to make it into professional suites. I don't know if anyone actually went in there and moved in for renting a place, but it's being readied for future use. So it's still a useful place. Thank you for listening to this.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours. And we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And you can also tune into a large selection of other podcasts and much more at his website. Again, that's holyokecanaltour.org. And again, you can email him directly for private tours or to inquire about anything else at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com.